First off, welcome to Build, everyone. I know you stayed your lunch, so hopefully we'll keep the intensity up in this talk and show you some entertaining stuff. There's a lot of demos in this talk, so you'll hopefully learn about some new offerings we have, get some inspiration about what you can do with App Center, as well as look towards the future a little bit and some of the things that we're checking out. This is actually my first time speaking at Builds, so I'm super excited to be here. Yeah, getting hyped up already. I love it. So joining me today is Kaushik Gopal from Instacart. We started working together a few months ago, though I've been using Instacart for about 3 to 4 years. So when I got the chance to get on his podcast, show him some love for his products, as well as try to get him onto my products, we ended up having a great time working together to actually get Instacart onboarded to App Center as a whole. Kaushik, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Hey everyone, this is also my first time at a build session. I'm super excited to be here. I started an Android developer podcast called Fragmented. I also work as a senior Android engineer at Instacart, and at Instacart we were looking for a very comprehensive CI solution at the time, and that's how Patrick and I met. As a mobile developer, we have very specific needs, and some of these needs were met really well with App Center. So what I'd like to do today in this session is probably share some of my first-hand real experiences using App Center. It's funny, I think Patrick told me like 2 weeks back, hey, would you like to come on stage and see me demo new stuff? And I was like, yeah, who wouldn't? The guy's a magician, by the way. If you see him on his keyboard with all the demos, I'm super excited to see these demos. So before you blow our minds, Patrick, would you like to give the folks
Sure. Sure.
Would you like to give folks like an overview of what App Center is, just in case they don't?
Absolutely. So App Center aims to be the total package for mobile, UWP, and macOS developers in short. It supports all the main features you'd expect from a DevOps pipeline, from building and testing in the cloud to distributing it in an app, as well as collecting crash and analytics data. We basically aim to do as much as possible with as little input from your side as needed. That way you can approach App Center with a simplified mindset and really attack a problem without investing a whole lot of time in the solution. If you're really curious about what App Center is all about, I'm actually going to show a whole lot of it today. It's not just going to be for mobile developers. There's some special stuff towards the end to get you guys excited for some of the stuff in the future, as well as you'll be able to see me put it to work pretty much. To better understand kind of what our audience and who our audience is, I actually asked Kaushik to share some of his experiences, so you guys can get kind of a brief background on what it's like for a mobile developer working around stuff.
Absolutely. So the thing is, when I started out, I said there are very specific requirements that we have as mobile developers, right? So as a developer, that when you want to build an app and release it to the App Store or the Play Store, it isn't necessarily enough to just have like a build cycle going, right? It is one of the most critical parts, but you need a whole host of services, right? You need testing, you need business insights, you need like chat integrations, actually releasing it to the App Store and the Play Store, having your build pipeline work together. A whole host of these services is really critical if you want a successful app in the App Store or the Play Store, right? But I'm an Android developer, and the part where I felt that App Center sort of saved me the most time is in the build cycle. So what I actually want to do is unpack just that portion, which is basically the developer run, right? I just want to give you a quick sample of what it usually means to be a mobile developer and these different services, how App Center sort of plays and comes to be pretty useful in this cycle. So when you start off, the most obvious thing is, a PM comes to me, says, hey, we have this idea for a great feature. I write the code for the feature, and the next thing I know, I want to commit it usually to a VCS, right? Like a version control system. So GitHub is a very common system that most folks understand. Right after this, though, if you're an Android developer, there are these things called a static analysis checkpoints, right? This could be lint, this could be like find bugs, check style. There are a whole host of tools and services that help keep your code quality high in an automated fashion. And this is where it gets interesting, right? Like this is great because if I'm a developer and I have like 4 other developers, like in all likelihood you're going to like commit code and you want to keep the code quality high in sort of an automated fashion. This is great. These tools help with it, but the big problem is they take time, right? And I don't know if you're an Android developer or like an iOS developer. If there's one thing that, if you want to bring all the developer races together, it's the universal hate for build times. Everyone hates how long it takes for build times, right? Nobody likes their build time. Like, there is never a good answer. Like, if you ask anyone what your build times are, in all likelihood, they're going to say like, well, it's too long, right? Too short build times is never a problem that we have. But the next thing is it doesn't stop there, right? We also have the most critical part of our build flow, which is running unit tests and UI tests, right? Now you have to understand, if I'm in this flow, if I'm in the zone, I got my feature, like I want to keep committing 20 or 40 lines of code, I want these checks to run, but I don't want to necessarily have them run on my local machine, because that'll like slow me down tremendously, right? Instead, what I want to do is I want to have a friend like Patrick who works at App Center, and I want to get his machines on the cloud to run these things. And all I care about is only to be notified when something's broken, right? In all likelihood, I'm not a great developer, but I'm a decent developer, I would say. So if I commit like maybe 60 commits, it's probably 2 or 3 commits that are really breaking things, right? And it's only at that point that I want to be notified of these things, right? So this is also an important piece of like being fast and like leveraging these services to like help us more faster. But it doesn't end there. There's also things like shipping it, releasing it to the Play Store. So enough talk. At this point, I think we should get to a point where we should just like get an app out there and start playing. So Patrick, come on.
Cool.
Let's do it.
So we're going to start with onboarding. Couchrick, I know, went through onboarding into App Center before.
I will tell you, sometimes I think he has like masochistic tendencies because he made me go through a lot, by the way. But yeah, and some of the stuff I saw today was definitely far more easier. So I'm a little mad at him.
So when I was playing with a few things, like we have the Azure DevOps project, we have different VS Code extensions that help with onboarding and managing other stuff in Azure. I was pretty jealous, and so about a month and a half ago, we went about rectifying that problem, which was how do you get people into App Center as quick and easily as possible. And so what we've done is we've worked on a couple different onboarding solutions. I'm actually going to show you how to onboard 4 apps in basically 10 minutes using multiple different routes, and I'll show you 3 today, for example. And so, Couch, if you want to go ahead and actually switch over to my machine.
Let's do it.
All right, so we're on my dev machine, basically. We don't have any projects, we have no folders. I'm going to go ahead and actually create one for builds. We're just going to go ahead and launch VS Code. We use a lot of VS Code in the App Center team as a whole, and so one of the things that we wanted to do was make it more accessible. I personally came from working on technology in App Center like CodePush, which rely on React Native and Cordova, and so this provides a nice, easy way to manage things in App Center directly from VS Code. The first thing that we were talking about is how do you get started. With the new extension, which is already in the marketplace today, you can basically have the option show up on an empty folder that allows you to start a new project. Kaushik, as I know, you basically did all of this by hand.
This was not that easy then, folks. Let me tell you that.
There's a lot of setup steps. We have multiple SDKs. We have things that you need to create in the cloud. You need a repository. There's also multiple things you need to create in App Center to get it all hooked up. And so what we did was we condensed that down into an integration that you'll find is probably by far the easiest way you can set up a mobile application in the cloud today. It actually supports logging into VSTS. So right now it's asking me where I want to put the repository. Remember, we started with an empty folder, and so we don't have a repository in the cloud. Because we want to practice good practices, it actually will ask me where I want to put it in VSTS. And it goes ahead and lists my different orgs that I already have underneath my App Center account. So once you've logged into the extension, it picks all of this up and get ready to work. And just by clicking this one button, you're going to see it kick off and do a whole lot of work for you. It basically provisions a sample project automatically. So if you're curious about what React Native is and how to get started, I recommend this by far. It sets up the App Center SDKs, which is going to give you crashes, analytics out of the box. It installs CodePush, which you'll be able to see in a little while that allows the hotfix releases in the wild. It actually configures build in the cloud, hooks that new VSTS repository up to your new App Center apps, and essentially lets you get going right away. And so what I'm going to do is set my current app to Android. It being React Native, it actually provisions 2 apps for you, one for iOS and one for Android. We're just going to go ahead and close these dialogues. I don't need them right now. And one of the things I'm going to do is just flip over to the terminal. And I'm just going to elect to start.
Wait, just like that, the app was created?
Yeah, you're done, basically. Okay. So I apologize for all the time that you wasted.
Well, I will collect later, my friend.
So after it, while this app is launching, let's go into App Center and actually take a look. Part of the extension is we actually have basically hotkeys for everything. So you can choose to use the current app, navigate to build. It's going to open up App Center directly to the build service, where you can already see there's the application building in the cloud, essentially. So from day one, minute one, essentially, you can start from a good foundation. And from there, you can rip apart the sample, build the app however you want, or just explore if you're a little curious about what we can do. So one of the things that we can't do automatically for you today is do something like setup signing. And so I'm going to quickly just go into here, configure signing options, upload my key store, put in my password.
Password 123, I hear is very
Yeah, of course, exactly. And one of the other things it actually does is it sets up a distribution group for you. Collaborators on an app are basically developers, and testers are a separate pool of users that you want to distribute an application to so that they can actually give it a go. We recently, it's worth pointing out, added in connected stores so you can get your releases up to Google Play, iTunes, test flights, as well as Intune. And you can do that right from our build service as well. For the purpose of today, I'm going to actually send it to the beta testers group. And we're essentially done. We actually have a signed app. We can send that out to people. And we are essentially good to go as far as App Center is considered in the cloud. If we flip back over to my simulator, I actually started this up. And so you can check out the app. It's essentially a sample app that our interns made last summer. They built a few different versions, Xamarin, iOS native, Android native. And one of the things we recently did was bring that into React Native as well. And so we have the same exact app coded essentially 4 different ways that you can play with today. If you want to just get a general feel for some of the features that are available in App Center, as well as play around with the functionality yourself. And so we've now finished onboarding, essentially, for our VS Code in product implementation.
4 minutes.
4 minutes, it works out. So the next thing, I want to go back to the PowerPoint for me. Absolutely. Is how do you get on when you have a project already? Well, there's a few things you can do, and I'm going to show you 2 ways. One way you saw in the keynote, and we're going to cover that again for anybody who hasn't seen it already, but I'm going to kind of do it in a different fashion. We're going to onboard both platforms at the same time. Okay. So if you go ahead and flip back to my machine real quick, let me just go ahead and get rid of this for now. We're going to flip on over to my GitHub account. And we're going to bring up that sample app. So the sample app, like I said, open source in GitHub. There's multiple versions. Because I'm working with the React Native one, we're actually going to work with that one directly. You can actually go ahead and fork that repository directly if you guys are GitHub users. Makes it easy, allows you to start from a good starting point without having to do that initial commit yourself. We're going to elect to clone this to my local machine. I'm going to go back to my build box. I'm going to go ahead and clone it. We're just going to call it sample because that's all it is at this point. We'll go into that directory. It is a React Native app which uses Node, so we are going to install the NPM modules directly in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to check out a new branch because we're going to make some changes. And I want those changes to show up on a separate branch when I push them back up. So go ahead and check out a new branch. And I'm just going to go ahead and launch another window of code. So the nice thing about this extension is you don't have to start clean. You can actually leverage the functionality in there to create an app in App Center for you. So using this portal option, you have a couple different menu items here as well. It's basically asking you for an app to use. And so because we just clone this directly, it's brand new, we have the option to create a new app in App Center. I'm going to go ahead and create an iOS app. We'll just call it App Center Sample. It's going to, again, ask me where I want to put it. I'm going to throw that into the build org that I have available. And we can just click this button to pop it over and check it out. So we actually have set up the app inside of App Center, but there's one important step that's missing right now, which is the ability to link our SDKs dynamically to the project. And so one of the things we want to do is click this little install. I'm going to say I want to link it to my new app in App Center that I actually created. It's letting me know that, hey, we're going to run some stuff, and we essentially have more work to do to make this seamless. So you're going to have to copy some of this because the prompt is our standard onboarding to our SDKs for the most part. So I can paste in the app secret. It's going to go through. It's going to ask me how I want to collect analytics for my application. You can basically enable it automatically so that it automatically ships telemetry up. But with new things like GDPR compliance and just good user experience, you might want the option to say, hey, I'm going to prompt and I'm going to enable it myself. And so we now have linked the SDK to the project. If I do a git status, you're going to see I have a couple changes. And basically what I'm going to need to do is push these up because I'm ready to actually start working with this in the cloud. So I'm going to commit that and then push up my code to where it needs to go, which is back into GitHub. And we've essentially finished the entire onboarding process for current app that you just cloned out of GitHub. Real easy, real simple, designed to be fast and quick. And this actually leads to how we onboard the Android app. So some of the stuff that you saw in the keynote today, which my colleague, Samina, actually demoed for you guys, is actually the ability to onboard through GitHub directly onboard the App Center directly inside of GitHub. And so if we actually go back to my fork, do a little branch switching so that it shows it. Need a little refresh so it shows up. Switch to the build 2018. And you'll notice it obviously is ahead now. And what I want to do is I want to commit those changes back to my master branch. So I'm going to select my fork instead of going back to the main Microsoft branch. I'm going to create a pull request, which is then going to show me a new prompt, which is the stuff that was demoed a little bit earlier, which is the ability to onboard the App Center component to GitHub directly. I can scroll down. Looks like I have a subscription set up already, which is always going to make it a little difficult. Let me just go ahead and swap this out. We can install for free. Complete the order. It's going to bring us to the new onboarding flow. Oh.
The live demo gods warned us, by the way.
Oh, yes.
But we decided, hey, let's just do it anyway.
We're going to do it live, always live. Let me reset this a little bit for you guys so you can get the full experience as well as the completed Android application install. Let's just go to the marketplace directly, pull up App Center, edit my plan. We'll cancel that one more time, and then we'll be able to do the full onboarding like we were expecting to. So what we'll do is we'll set up a new plan, install for free, complete it. It's now going to ask me to authorize. We're going to authorize that sample app that I now have underneath my account directly. I'm going to go ahead and install that. This should now go to the new onboarding flow, which I can go ahead and click through. We already onboarded the iOS, so I'm just going to do the Android this time. One of the nice things is this as well provisions everything for you. So you don't have to worry about configuring all the little details as you get going. As we go through, there are a couple things worth mentioning on the specific page that I didn't point out earlier. One are our custom build scripts that you can use when you hook into our build process. We actually started a new open source repository, which I think is great. There's a lot of things that users like to do with build scripts. And so App Center currently supports 3 build scripts that you can just put in your repo and will automatically pick up for you. Basically, there's a post-build, post-clone, and pre-build step you can put in there. And so we have a collection of samples that we've assembled over some time. And so if you guys would like to check it out, it'll be on the materials link at the end of the demos.
I want to take a moment to stress how amazing having those build scripts are, because you can actually do a lot of cool stuff in the process, right? For example, one thing that we do is like we have a certain lint warning count what we basically do is say, hey, we don't want developers to increase the lint pointing count. You know, if you're like working at a startup and we want to make sure that we have like our builds running at this point, like we don't want to get bogged down by actually like fixing all the lints. So a lot of these tweaks you can actually do at this point. You can send custom notifications if you have like a Slack channel or like a Teams channel. All of that is possible at this stage. Yeah.
Absolutely. And basically that brings us to a point where we now have turned essentially these 3 apps that I already had in my projects into a project that actually has 4 additional apps already. And we've onboarded all 4 in under 20 minutes of total talk time with only about 10 minutes of real work being done. So, which brings us to our next topic. Now that we've onboarded, the next thing we're going to worry about is how do we extend it? And so one of the best things that we did when we created App Center was we have an API first mentality. And what that means is essentially pretty much anything we can do, we want to expose to customers. And in fact, we expose our APIs traditionally first, so you guys can have the ability to play with them. One of the key benefits to this is you can build really rich experiences. And so if you're looking at the web portal, which I'm showing you today, that's actually built on our public APIs. There's multiple clients, such as the VS Code extension, also built on our public APIs. We have native tester apps, so if you're a tester using App Center, again, also built on our public APIs. And we have a bunch of other tooling and things that depend on the public API service we actually make available to customers today. What that means is we can do some cool stuff, but it also means that you can get access to it and really see how we put the product together and how you can use it to flex your workflow today. So one of the things that you're going to inevitably wonder as an App Center user is how do you extend it? And so for that piece, we have a pretty cool page, which haven't really seen in a lot of other products, but I'm excited that we have it in ours. And so if we go right back to my demo machine again, I'd like to show off our openapi.appcenter.ms page. I personally use this page all the time. It's invaluable, not just from a definition standpoint where you're trying to identify what endpoints are available. There's a lot. There's over 200 endpoints we've already made public, and by the beginning of next year, I'm sure there will be a whole lot more. One of the key benefits of this page is you can actually log into it. So I can give it an API token. I can give it my username and password. I can essentially log in so I can test out endpoints directly in the web page. Really and cool. So I've logged in as my current user. And so I can use this nice little option to try it out, which gives me the ability to execute this call and see what the payload looks like. You can actually get it back, and so you can see who I'm logged in as. You can actually get details. If I had an avatar on this account, you get that information. But you can apply this to essentially every other GET call that we made public today. If you want to do things like post and delete and they require complex payloads, we still use other tools to test those endpoints. But in terms of just figuring out what data is coming back and what you're looking at, it's a truly invaluable tool. And so to give you an example, let's go back to one of the apps that we created during the onboarding period, which is this Build 2018 Android app.
Oh, give me a second. Let me just switch back. Sorry.
Moving too quick.
Yeah.
So if we go into the build view, we've essentially created a build, but we wonder what that configuration looks like. If you're curious what we're doing,
I switched it to the wrong one. Of course I did.
5 and 6 cache.
5 and 6. I'll get it right the next time.
So, 6.
I think it needs the magic touch.
It needs the magic touch, yes. Oh.
Well, not so magical.
So if we go back into App Center, essentially there's 2 key pieces of information you'll care about when you communicate with our API. One is the owner and one is the app name. The owner is either going to be your username or it's going to be an org. The app name is obviously just going to be like the slug name for the application that you're wanting to deal with. And so if we actually look at this URL, you'll notice there's 2 key bits of information that you care about. This is always the owner name, and this is essentially always the app name field. And so what you can do is take this bit of information, and let's say I want to actually look at what a config really looks like. Too far down. Oh, decided to jump down on me this time. Let's go up. So if we go to the build section and we actually look at the branch config one, so we can expand this endpoint. It has a few fields. I can click this try it out button, and I can go ahead and decide I want to look at it. We have a master branch, which is pretty standard for most implementations. So I'm just going to put master in this field. My owner is build 2018. That's the org name that my app is under, essentially. And then I can just drop in the app name itself and click execute. And what this is going to do is it's actually going to call our API just like the other endpoint, except you can actually take a look at the build configuration we have in App Center for you. And if you want to make tweaks to it, essentially you can take this payload, send it to the post call, and you can actually create new configs or send a patch call to patch other ones. It makes it really convenient and really nice, and it's something that all these other demos that you're about to see are essentially built upon, is the idea of going here, checking it out, making sure I have what I have is right, and playing around with it to see what I can do. Go back.
Alrighty.
Cool. So one of the things that makes this API one of my favorite things is the ability to not only build your own solutions, which is something that Kaushik is very familiar with, but you can actually build solutions for other users of App Center. And so one of our Microsoft MVPs, Dan Siegel, has actually been working on a VS for Mac extension, which is really exciting to see. And so we've been working with him off and on to kind of push forward some of the features and make sure you can get it out the door and really understand our API and what it can do. It's really awesome. It's already available. It's in. You can grab it from the alpha feed today. As the Prism Toolkit. It's up there if you want to check it out. So if you're a VS for Mac user, you can give him some feedback, let us know what you think, and then it'll help lead us into the future and figure out how to make it better. But Kaushik, I know that you implemented some APIs for yourself, and there's one specific use case you wanted to talk about here.
I want to talk about this use case because I thought it was very interesting. So one of the reasons we've actually sold for using App Center is because of this whole API first mentality, right? So typically when you build a mobile app, there's a high likelihood that you connect to a lot of third-party services, right? What that means is you actually have third-party API tokens in your code, right? Now, as good developers, you're never supposed to store this in GitHub. Do not do that, because I've learned the wrong way. So what you want to do instead is sort of have this stored in a secure fashion, right? There are multiple ways to do this in App Center. There's like secure environment variables and a lot of other mechanisms to store these things securely, right? So what happens though is if you have a security department like my company, they watch out for mistakes like this, right? So what they typically do is they rotate these tokens, right? And this can happen like maybe once a quarter, once in 3 months. It is common practice to have these tokens rotated, right? Now what that means though is essentially if I have my build on App Center, typically, any single branch has like about 20 API tokens, right? What this means is I have to go like an animal, like use the interface, update every single like environment variable 20 times. And it gets even worse because say I have 5 developers, right? And my developers are all working on parallel branches. That basically means I have to go and update it for each of their branches because they're going to come complaining, saying, hey, like for some reason the API token is invalid, right? So if you do the quick math, that's about like 100 times that you have to actually go and update the environment variables, right? Like that is a no-go. If you want to get your developers to quit, like give them a lot of like manual, tedious work, right? So the good thing is with App Center, what we did is we recognized that there's actually an API to update these environment variables in a secure fashion. So what we told our security folks is, hey, the next time you actually rotate the tokens, here's this script. So we just asked them to run this script, and this script connects to App Center in a secure fashion, and it actually updates all of the tokens. So it's completely automated, right? So these are like some of the few ways that you can actually leverage App Center to do a lot of these cool things. And this is just one use case. We have found like a whole bunch of other use cases where like the whole API mentality has come in really handy because I can't keep tapping Patrick on the shoulder and asking him to build everything for me. So instead he's like, here's this API, you can build it yourself. So I thought that was a very interesting use case. But I do know there's another thing that I care a lot about, and I've told you this multiple times, and it's testing. So what does App Center have in terms of like, the testing land?
Sure. So App Center has real-world or real-device automated UI testing in the cloud. We focus primarily on mobile applications, and as you know, there are a whole lot of models, a whole lot of variations of different devices you can run your application on, from different platforms to different operating systems.
Different manufacturers.
Different manufacturers, yes, absolutely. And so one of the key benefits that we have inside of App Center is the ability to run those tests. We have over 3,000 devices in our device cloud. Scattered different parts of the globe, and so it's really exciting to see some of the power that those device cloud data centers give us, because what you can do is take your code, ship it, run it on 100 devices, get real results from what it looks like to what issues arise on different devices. And so I'm going to show Kaushik something new, which he hasn't actually seen yet, because it suits the need of one of his requests, which was to make it as easy as possible to run those UI tests. So before, if you want to flip back on over for me, Kaushik. Before there was the requirement to open up your CLI, run the tests using long commands. Basically, we wanted to short circuit that so that it's something that's intuitive and easy to do. There are a few use cases that we support with this. One is the ability to run tests right in VS Code. We do support synchronous and asynchronous tests, so if you want to wait while you're in your editor while they're running, you can do that. If you want to run them asynchronously, which is usually my preferred choice, it will essentially kick off the test in the cloud and send you an email whenever that test run is finished.
Nice.
One of the things that it also does is it's going to ask me what device I want to run the tests on. And so it not only gives me all the different models.
Nice.
You're an Android dev, so I elected the Android models.
Thank you.
But there are a couple different device sets already included that I have configured in my org already today.
Wait, so I had a quick question. Assuming I have a specific commit, because typically what happens is when I have like one commit that breaks my build, can I take a specific commit and point it to one of these devices? Because
Absolutely.
in all likelihood, like it only breaks on one device, right?
Correct. Yeah, if you roll back your commit, you go to a specific commit shop, you can open that up in VS Code and essentially trigger a build to that device directly. And so for this instance, maybe I want to trigger it to the devices that I use for pull request checks. And so I can run that PR build, and it's essentially going to make the bundle on my machine. It's going to package everything up. It's going to ship it. And I really didn't have to do anything else other than select two options to define how I want to run that test.
Nice.
So while that is running, because it will take a little while to build, let's actually go to an application that has some test runs already done. If we flip over to this other application and go to the test service, you're going to see a few tests that have already executed. These ones were done on smaller sets, 6 devices. This one I recently ran, and it covers 62 devices. So I essentially selected a whole pool in our test cloud and essentially ran my application on all of them. And the results that you get are very rich. You can drill right into them. The sample app comes with one UI test already baked in for iOS and Android, so you can see what they look like and see how you want to build them yourself in the future. Right now it comes with XCUI and Espresso, but there are a couple other frameworks available today that you guys can start messing with as well. And so what you can do is drill into the actual test. And this is by far my favorite view in App Center, if only because it is the most detailed and it's just a beautiful image to see all these devices together. And as you scroll down, everything looks good. I have different tablets, I have different phones. But then I hit this chunk of devices. And these are actually failures that occurred. And I know they're failures because visually I can tell that they do not look right. And there's one in particular that stands out because it's the device that actually loaded the application but did not, for whatever reason, pass the test. And so I can drill into this device. I can look at memory and CPU utilization. I can see how long it took. I can actually go into the details of the phone, so I can look at the release date and say, 2014 is
quite some time.
Too long ago, and I just don't want to support it, so I can just move on and continue about my day.
That device is KitKat, by the way, as well. This is some time back.
Yes, exactly. And so if I'm curious, I can go into the logs themselves, and we break down logs in 3 ways: failures, the actual complete test logs, and the device logs as well. And so I can actually quickly open up and see what the error was directly inside of App Center. And from here, I know that it's having a hard time finding the view. I'll have to go in and debug it, figure out what's wrong, but for the most part, it's excellent to at least have some indicator as to what went wrong on the specific device.
And this is like super beneficial because as mobile developers, one of the things that we do is when you run tests on a whole suite of devices, having those screenshots is just like a quick sort of like gut check to like make sure like everything's rendering in the right fashion, right? Yep. So even though the tests pass, sometimes you can actually have a more visual sort of approach to like figuring out like if things are rendering the way you want them to.
Correct. And the other piece, which I mentioned earlier, are the device sets. I have a couple here, and actually the way that they're laid out was, conveyed to me by Kaushik that this is how they do it. And so I'm going to let him better explain why he has this setup and how it can be useful to you guys as well.
Yeah, so device sets is actually a pretty cool feature. Initially when I saw it, I didn't quite get it, but then after we started using it, it's proven to be super useful. So the way we do it is, at least at Instacart, right, when we have multiple developers actually building and running tests, we don't want to necessarily go all Patrick and run it like on 62 devices, right? Essentially what we want to do is we want to pick 2 common devices and run our UI tests constantly against those 2 devices, right? Once we've gotten to a reasonable level of confidence, before we merge our developer branches or our feature branches into the master branch, at that point, what we want to do is make sure that we actually run it on a whole suite of devices. So what we did is we actually created very similar to this setup. We have like a PR device set, which is just like 2 common devices. And then we also have a production suite of devices. So what we did is we actually ran analytics to see like the most common devices that are used in the for our Android users. We bunched them all to a device set. And anytime we actually merge back into master, like we merge our feature branches into master, we run our tests against this whole suite of devices. And this is like super critical, right? So this is like a very convenient way that we use device sets. So keep running it against one device set, but then before you actually merge in, you run it across a whole suite of devices. Alrighty, so I need to switch.
A lot of switching going on today.
Yeah. So this is just like an example of some of the actual UI tests that we have running at Instacart, right? So we just put a screenshot here, but you can see we have like close around 70 to 100 UI tests, and it actually gives you a nice breakdown as to like what are the exact tests that are running. And a quick tidbit, if you're actually a mobile developer or an Android developer, I'm not sure how many of you folks know, but even push notifications are actually rendered quite differently between devices, which is why what we do is we actually have push notification tests also run on real devices, because believe it or not, like there are certain devices that might hide critical content that you would otherwise expect to see, right? So it's really convenient because these are actual real devices, not like simulators or something. You can run actual code on these devices and have your UI tests run. So again, a nice tidbit to know as you begin to use this feature. Alrighty. But if testing is important to me, I know distribution is really important to Patrick, and he's given me a lot of like insight there. So why don't you walk us through the next?
Still trying to get you on board with distribution.
One day.
So distribution was actually when I started the App Center team just a little bit over a year ago. I actually worked heavily on the distribution space, and so it's one of my favorites just by default. Distribution is key for any software bar. Essentially, you want to get your releases out to alpha, beta testers in private closed settings, and then you want to publicly get them out to consumers either through a store or some other distribution channel, whatever it might be for yourself. And so one of the things that comes up is, well, how do you get a release down a pipeline? And so what I wanted to show you was, again, another open source package, which will be at the end of the talk, to analyze crash analytics data and decide when to move your release down the pipeline. If you can switch on over real quick for me, Kaush. So we have a solution inside of VS Code. If we flip back to the app that we created in the very beginning, in this build 2018 Android release, and we go to the distribute section of App Center, you'll notice a group that's already there. What we want to do is create a new group. We'll just call this pre-release. This might be a wider audience. Maybe we want to publicly share those releases. One of the benefits about Android is it's actually extremely easy to distribute your application to anybody who wants to try it, essentially. And so we've created a public distribution group, which is accessible from this URL that's spit out up here. There are no releases there because, frankly, there are no releases in that group yet. But if we flip over to the beta testers group, you'll notice we already have a release that's shown up. Essentially, this was the release that we distributed at the beginning of the talk. And so what we want to do is carry that over to our pre-release group automatically without, let's say, manual intervention. For those curious, if you want to manually release it, you can click on the release and use this distribute dropdown. It'll allow you to do things like select the destination, update your release notes, review them quickly before a change is actually sent out. One of the key benefits I find for this UI is it actually, because it came out of the build service, will include your notes. And so if you do things like squash your changes when merging them into master, you'll see those list of changes here, and you can update them, send them out to a larger audience who might not be so technically inclined. And that way they can get a nice clear message as to what was changed from the previous release they dealt with, essentially. So flipping back over to VS Code for a second, I have an Azure function that I created to control all of this. I really like Azure functions. I really like logic apps. I really like all those components because I can do things quickly and easily, especially using the Azure Functions extension like I mentioned earlier. And what this function does is it will go through, and I know it's a little hard to see because I'm so zoomed in over here, but we've added a App Center API JavaScript class to it, which is capable of getting crash information, getting session information, getting installation information, and pulling back those counts to look at them and quantify whether or not you should actually ship the release to the next group. And that's all controlled from a config file. The reason we use config files is because of the Azure Functions. I have CI set up in the cloud. I'm actually able to make changes to this, push it up, and my Azure function over here will actually update automatically. And so it'll keep running in the cloud for me, but I can go ahead and test it locally. So we're going to do that right now. So if I go back to groups over here, we have one release there. My install and session crashes represent the number I'm willing to, what is the threshold before it actually gets triggered. So installs require somebody just downloads the app. Sessions require somebody's at least run it a few times. And crashes, you pretty much want this one to be very low because this is the number of crashes you're willing to tolerate before shipping a release. And so because we haven't technically run the app, we can leave these all at 0 for now, and I can just go ahead and update this to build 2018. Again, that's the app name, which you can get in any URL. My source is the beta testers group, which is right there. My pre-release is the pre-release group right there. And if we go ahead and run it, which I always keep this command handy, just so I can run it real quick. Let me expand this up so you can actually see it run a little bit better. It's going to go ahead and execute. You'll be able to see it analyzing the file. You'll be able to see it basically stating that this is time to re-release, and it'll go ahead and push it out. And so if you look at here, it's checking the stats. Doesn't see any crashes, doesn't see any sessions. Installations, it actually sees a few because I did run this in the test cloud. So I technically could have upped the installations to a couple and it still would have worked fine. But if we go back over here and we do a quick refresh, if everything worked correctly, you should be able to see the 1.0 release over here. And so I did this demo not really for my own benefit, but to provide customers with an example of what it really looks like to kind of tie a few beacons together and accomplish something like an automated distribution pipeline. This can be quickly and easily extended, so if you want to trigger a build based on metrics, you can as well. But currently today, I just focus on getting it down the distribution group pipeline. So moving on from getting it shipped. So I've shipped it to some testers. It's out in the wild. And I need to do things like update it. And traditionally with native applications, there are restrictions around how you can actually perform that update. And so one of the things that we have in App Center is code push, which allows you to dynamically update React Native and Cordova applications that are tied to App Center, essentially. And so it's really powerful tech, if only because you don't have to submit to the store again if you want to fix a bug or patch it. And so what you can do is actually ship that out pretty much in real time. And so I'll go ahead and open up the sample app again. And let's just go ahead and go to the source. and go to the screens. Let's just go to the welcome screen, which is this first little screen that you see right here. And what we'll do is expand my code view a little bit. We'll just change the actual welcome message itself. And again, going back to that VS Code extension, you can actually release an update from VS Code. This will package it up, it will ship it out, and what will end up happening is users that are running that application can actually get the update. So you'll notice that it was successfully released, which is great. I'm going to actually flip on over to the Code Push tab. You have a few options on how you want to do the updates. You can either do them immediately. You can put an update dialog in there if you want to. You can do it on resume, so when the user uses the app again, it will auto-load itself. But the purposes of here, we've actually tied it to a button. That way you can validate that the update is actually occurring. So we'll go ahead and install the update. Right now, it's not configured for immediate, so the next time the user goes in and starts the app, if everything works out right, it should update for them automatically.
Nice.
One of the most powerful features with Code Push is the fact that I can actually go back to the beginning. I can release an update again, and I now have a few updates that I've pushed through Code Push. And so if I go through here, I can sync this again, install it. It's going to update this package one more time. If I switch back into the app itself, it should be back at its original content. That's not really the powerful part. The powerful part is inside of App Center, there is a Code Push page. And you'll see the 2 releases that I did already. But what you can actually do is disable releases, rollback releases. You have actual control from within App Center as to what content that user is getting. So let's say you hotfix a bunch of devices. There is a problem. You can actually go in here, disable that release.
Nice. And
the next time that a user checks for an update, you will essentially roll them back to the previous version. So if everything works correctly, it'll roll back fine. And I can, open it up again, and it should be back to the welcome to build.
Nice.
So you can enable, disable releases on the fly. You can decide what content's out there. You can update it dynamically. Again, this can be for anybody, no matter if their phone had downloaded the application from the store. It's all available at your fingertips, and it's really powerful, interesting stuff.
Rolling back releases is really tricky, especially like in the mobile development side. So this is pretty powerful.
Absolutely. So going back to the next piece.
Okay.
So it brings us to analytics. And so analytics in App Center is, again, very focused on mobile development for the most part, outside of things like UWP and macOS. So what I wanted to do with this demo was I wanted to do something a little bit different. I'd gone to a couple of the guys on the engineering team for analytics, and I simply had asked them, what kind of data can I put into this service? And they mentioned that really it's kind of device agnostic. And so I set about 3 weeks ago building a couple new things because I wanted to actually test that theory and look at ways that I can actually apply analytics and use it today for things that are more like future items as a whole. And so the first thing that I looked at was, explore new terrain. How do I go through and apply analytics to something that's very not what we kind of expected when we built App Center? One of the key takeaways from App Center as a whole is it really is just a platform with an API. Sure, there are things that are focused on mobile development, but at the end of the day, it's rather open in a lot of ways, and you can tell we really built it with a mindset that this thing was going to have to last for a long time, essentially. And so when you look at all of our clients, you start to realize, we have multiple different types of interfaces which have rich experiences on their own, but we can also create some new interesting experiences today that you can check out right now. So what I did was I onboarded my garden to App Center. I basically like to cook a lot at home. And so what I did was I wanted to dial in my production. Living up here in the Pacific Northwest, we don't get a lot of sun. And so I have an indoor grow light, I have a drip system, I have my garden, and I basically decided I wanted to optimize my production year-round, because obviously there's not certain types of years. I prefer different types of food. I want to cook everything I want to cook all the time. And so what I did was I actually took an Arduino microcontroller, put a Wi-Fi shield on it, hooked up a moisture soil capacitive sensor to it, wrote a bunch of C++ code, uploaded to the device using standard Arduino sketch files, and I basically hooked it up to read how much moisture is in my soil. I have a drip system which feeds it, a certain number of milliliters of water every day, twice a day, and I wanted to make sure I'm within a range that's acceptable for me to actually keep production up and booming, as it is, as you can tell from my photo.
This is gardening for nerds 101.
And so, thanks, Kaushik. Appreciate that.
Only love, man.
And so, what does this look like and how is it actually built? Well, anybody who's ever used Arduinos know that they're very simplistic. Our ingestion for analytics isn't very complicated, but it still is a lot more work in C++ than I was willing to do right now, and plus I wanted to do a couple other things as well. And so I ended up setting up an Azure function in the cloud with a wrapper for our ingest engine, and it allows my Arduino to send a simple REST call to that Azure function in the cloud. And the Azure function really takes that apart, prepares it in the right payload format, and sends that to our ingestion engine. And so if we go ahead and flip back to my machine real quick, I can actually bring up some of the code. And again, this is all on my GitHub. You can check it all out. It's actually a lot of fun, and my wife loves it because now we have fresh herbs all the time. So if I go ahead and load up, go into code, and I go to my Arduino moisture reader. There's a couple components to this project. There's obviously the Arduino component, which is here. If you're curious about what the circuit looks like, this is roughly the circuit. I actually upgraded to an Arduino Mega. It's because I needed more points, or more ports, more interrupts. And so this will work. But I recommend the Mega because it'll prep you for the future and more moisture zones readings, I should say. So you have the actual sensor code here, C++. But the thing that's important is I actually wrote a TypeScript wrapper for our ingestion engine. And so you can actually see the device information, session log, start service log, all that other good stuff. And it actually creates a basic wrapper for our ingestion engine. And so it operates off of a couple principles. There's 3 calls that you really care about when dealing with analytics in App Center, and that's the start service, start session, and the event log itself. Start service, you can imagine, is the first call that's going to be sent. A session is any time an application is active, and the event log is a custom event that you're sending. So this is the thing that I'm actually sending the payload in. What this allows me to do, because you would think this is kind of useless, is you can go into App Center, and I can click on my app here, which is the Garden app. I can actually look at analytics information here. You're going to see my one Arduino Mega 2560. You're going to see the one active user, because there literally is only one device right now, which not sure why it shows up in Alaska, but yeah, I guess it's part of the United States, so it all fits within the mold. The thing that you'll see is the events, and this is where we're digging into kind of what you can do with mobile applications themselves as well. You'll see a garden event. You're going to see the different descriptions that were sent over. You're going to see the different readings from that zone. I called it Zone 1 because Zone 1 is my first sensor. I plan to add a couple more so I can figure out the optimal placement for them as well. And then what you can do is dig a little deeper. One of the caveats of this view is I can only see that 24% of the time my garden is 71% moist. But with our AI export that's available underneath the settings, and this is something super powerful that mobile developers use today as well, I can set up an export to application insights. And that lets me go a little deeper. Because what I'm after is I want to know how consistent I am. And so I can view pretty much the same analytic metrics that I see in App Center today, but I can click this little analytics tab, which will bring up Kusto, and allow me to actually query that information in a manner that makes sense. And so if I open up a tab, I click on Custom Events, and I go ahead and just run this easy query. you're actually going to see all the different readings and events that were sent to App Center from my Arduino. The nice thing is you can drill in, you can check it out. It has different properties. Custom and dimensions is where those properties are that I'm sending.
Wait, so what is an optimum humidity level?
I'm finding it's about 70, 71% according to my current sensor, but I'll let you know in about 3 months whether or not my garden died. And so this has only been running for a week,
okay.
So we're still trying to get scientific with it. And so
then I'll just keep using Instacart.
Exactly. So the properties themselves are really nice. It's convenient. Essentially, whenever you send a custom event from your device, or custom property, I should say, it will appear here. So you can imagine on your phone, you can pack in extra bits of detail, and you can ship that to the back end. And you can look at that in a high-level way inside of our analytics service today. But if you want to drill a little bit deeper, you actually have that option using things like application insights or the blob export feature that we have available as well if you use another system. So the blob export is really if you have another telemetry system or analytics system you want to use, it will actually create exports of the analytics data that's received so you can import it into a new system whenever you want.
It's also good that you have only one user session, by the way, because if you had multiple user sessions, I would be a little worried.
It would be very curious.
Your home security then probably needs something.
So the next question, which is pretty standard, is what about the web? Arduinos and IoT stuff is fun, and I enjoyed it. But really, the benefit is what about web clients? Mobile applications today are not that different from SPA applications. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was put together a way to show you guys really the power of analytics directly built into App Center. And so I want to show you guys a SPA app. And I'm actually really excited because this is something that we had just put together. But it's enjoyable, and it actually proves the point very well as to what we're trying to accomplish here on the App Center team when it comes to analytics. So if you can flip back to my computer for me. So there is another, let's go, another demo, which is, and let's just start the server up. I'm going to go ahead and shrink this one a bit so we can just rip off this tab right here. Move this over so you can get a good view of what's going on. Go back to here. So we built a little card game. And the reason why we built a card game is for a couple reasons. You can essentially get really good analytics out of it. And I'm actually excited to show some of these events. Showed them to Kaushik earlier. It gives you kind of a different perspective on the way that you can put properties or put data into properties and then ship them to App Center and get some very useful data out of it that you can actually extend the picture with. And so there's another app that was in here as well, which is the Cards app, which I'm sure some of you saw on my main app list. And again, we can go back to analytics, which is going to show me a bunch of sessions because we've been randomly playing with it, randomly doing stuff. And what I can do when I play the game is I can actually go ahead and just, send events, send more events, call the hands, don't bet, the hand is over. And if you look back at the actual iTerm, which is in this window instead, you'll actually see the payloads that are being pumped to our analytics engine. And so it's sending all the data, what bets are occurring when the game is over. It's sending a lot of information, more than I thought we were going to fit into here, because what you can do is go to the Events tab, and this is where it starts getting kind of interesting. So we have different events which represent actions in the game. And what you can actually do is drill in to certain ones and get a nice reading on how often people do certain things. And what you can do, and something that I plan to do in the future, is feed this data back to the AI portion of the game so it can aggressively try to beat you. And so one of the things that it looks at is different metrics such as how frequently do players fold, and with what values in their hand do they fold with? Basically, what hands do people have the least confidence in? When a hand is over, essentially, what round does it typically terminate in? In this game, after round 4, any player can call the game. And so because of that, we want to see who calls it and how often they call it. But where it gets really interesting to me are the raises, the draws, the rounds over, and the round start, because you can see on average how much somebody will raise, what round they raise in. I can look at draw, so if I choose to draw a card instead, I can see on average what hand were people holding when they elected to draw a card versus what hand do they choose to stay or stand over here. So it provides a lot of insight just in general in terms of what you can look at and how you can look at that data. And there's a lot of use cases, a lot that isn't even explored in this talk. And so I encourage you to explore, especially with the little node wrapper for ingest that is available today, as well as our current SDKs. Really, there's a lot of possibilities that you can touch on, and I'm excited to hear some of yours.
So gardening and gambling, that's how he spends his time.
Pretty much, yes. So that brings us to the final things. If you want to try App Center, if you're not an App Center user, you can go to appcenter.ms. Here's a quick breakdown of the services and a couple of our basic plans. You can also just go to GitHub, try the onboarding flow, subscribe through there as well, and start using App Center today. If you're interested in the open source repositories that drive the talk, they are available at aka.ms/appcenterbuild2018. I have all the repositories on there, so you can check them out. Give me PRs, give me feedback. I'm happy to hear your thoughts and questions and find ways to innovate with App Center today. If you want to reach Kaushik or myself, you can get at me on GitHub or get at me on Twitter. Same thing with Kaushik. Kaushik also runs the Fragmented podcast, which is really great if you want to dig deep into Android development. Honestly, it's probably the best podcast out there for that, and so I highly recommend you check it out if you're curious about mobile development as it, for the Android space itself.
Thanks.
As always, put your evaluation of the talk here at Microsoft at Build, and you'll be eligible to win some kits. That's it. If we have any questions, we have a little bit of time. If you have questions, we're happy to answer them. Yes. What was that? Sorry.
How do you obfuscate
Offer.
Obfuscate.
Oh, obfuscate. Yeah. Sorry.
You should probably repeat the question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think, are those microphones active? Obfuscate the. I'm sorry. The obfuscate what exactly? Oh, apps like ProGuard for Android development stuff. Ah, yes, yes. So we actually are working on ProGuard support for Crash, for example. We have limited support for that type of obfuscation, but we are looking at targeting things in the future. And it's something we definitely have on our radar as something people want to do. Absolutely.
Typically, I guess the obfuscation would happen at the native app level.
Correct.
But the piece which I think Patrick is mentioning is where you want to link the analytics that you have. For example, with crashes, what you want to know is which line number, right? So I guess that's the piece that's coming up.
Exactly. You had a question as well?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm using Xamarin Forms with Hockey App. Is there a way to automatically migrate data from Hockey App with all the history and releases, all the data that I currently have in Hockey App into App Center?
Sure. So we do have the side-by-side offering, which people can turn on today to funnel information into Hockey App. In terms of a migration strategy, it's something that we actually have on our roadmap for the future. It's not determined when that's going to be, but there are plans to put some basic migration strategies in place for customers of Hockey App. Any other questions at all? Go ahead.
You were showing distribution, so test flight, the stores and whatnot. What if you're doing like an MDM, like an AirWatch or something like that? Could you do that, or is that something you got to customize?
You would have to customize that today. We actually do talk about MDM solutions. We're trying to find that right balance between what we want to add in and what customers can extend with. And so doing AirWatch and stuff is currently not something that's supported out of the box, but you could build that with a basic integration for the most part. Anything else? Yep.
How's the App Center support for UWP app, and how the support for GitHub Enterprise?
So the UWP we support, absolutely. Kaushik, I believe you use it with GitHub Enterprise today, or do you use the cloud version?
I think we use the cloud version right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
the on-prem ones, like when it comes to GitHub Enterprise and things like GitLab and whatnot, we have a keen eye on those ones, and we're actually trying to figure out how you create a rich experience like we do for the cloud versions inside of App Center today. And so I would be hard-pressed to say that it's going to be something that we don't evaluate sooner than later, because so many people like to run GitHub Enterprise and on-prem and all that good stuff. Yeah.
One of the barriers we had for not using the push notification SDK was that you guys don't have the ability to do aliases. Are you guys planning on doing that? Because we don't want to store the device token. They change all the time. We want to use like a user GUID or something, and then we can push to it on the server.
Got you. Are you a Notification Hubs customer by chance?
Urban Airship.
I got you.
So they've had alias forever.
Yeah.
Yes, Notification Hubs, we've used them as well.
Got you. Yeah, we when it comes to push is one of those areas where we're going to be adding more functionality to. We do have a big platform for push called Notification Hubs, which is by far the more robust solution today. But our plan is to move a lot of that into App Center in the future. And so things like alias support, like I would be happy to get that feedback so I can get it to the PM responsible for that area of the product. We're always interested to hear kind of what are the priorities of our customers and what features will match those the best. Yeah, absolutely.
So you showed us some of the examples with automated scripts. Is there a possibility of passing parameters to those scripts?
Yes, absolutely. We use there's environment variables inside of App Center directly, and so I can actually flip back to my screen real quick and show you exactly where those are at. If you go back into the builds, click on here. Open up here, open up the config. You have environment variables right here, which allow you to create standard ones, or I can elect to actually protect those variables so they can't be read by other users. And so when you write your build scripts, you actually just use environment variables. We set these on the machine at the time.
These ones will map to the app, like app will read these variables and. Right?
Yes.
These are not dynamic variables.
Well, these are set on the build machine. So when you're compiling the app, it's going to compile or utilize those values however you want to.
So when I mentioned the token pushing thing, this is exactly what I was mentioning, because these environment variables, you could have them swap at build time, because you don't want necessarily those to be stored in your code versioning system. But when the build actually prepares the app package, what you can do is you can substitute it with these environment variables. So this is what I meant, like manually going and updating it every single time. If I have like 20 tokens there, it's kind of a pain, right? So you use the parameters that you talk about to be able to update this.
And can this App Center be deployed on-premise and not be linked to the cloud? And can it? So it's like I'm talking about framework like Jenkins, like we run your automated test daily and report through Jenkins.
Yep.
So can this App Center be used like an on-premise solution to that?
Currently, it only exists in the cloud, and that's partially because it's very distributed. In terms of things like getting test cloud to run on-prem, like that service would be require a good amount of work just because of the way we've built our infrastructure to support that model. And so it is a question that we receive from time to time, but today it would be very difficult to run App Center on-prem as it is in Azure.
I see. And image comparison test that you mentioned, can it also do an image comparison and not really a UI test? Let's say if I have a map with certain images on it, and that's my test, I want to see the pixels are rendered with correct color. Can those tests be successfully run using these centers?
Well, there is a way, basically, and we thought about this. Eventually, we didn't end up doing it, but there is a way you could do it. Essentially, what happens is you can pull the screenshots, right? Because each time, like you have your UI tests run, like the screenshots are generated. So what you could do is in your post clone or post build step, what you can do is you can actually pull these images and run scripts on your own. So I mean, to your question, I don't know if it's natively available in App Center to do that, but you could totally you can spin your own solution. So we did many similar things with our UI tests. We had like very specific requirements. So we wrote custom scripts to be able to like juggle with some of those steps.
But the images will be different for different devices it will deploy to.
Absolutely, but you do have, you can pull those screenshots from like the different devices, as long as you know your device sets or the device that you had your test run. So when you spin up the UI test in your clone step, right, it actually gives, you supply a lot of those parameters. So if you write a script to hold all that information, you could write a script to do the mapping.
Okay. I might have to catch you later on for understanding this better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Any other questions?
So just firstly, just credit to you guys for the support that you provide directly in the app that really helped with some of the automated build stuff I was doing with Xcode. So I don't know if it's you guys or someone in the team, but that's great. I'm starting to use the eventing aspects of it, and my take on it is that with the iOS SDK, it was quite limited in what you could post back to the service via that, but it seems like the underlying APIs are a lot more sophisticated. When is there a plan of when the iOS SDK will catch up so that I could put more context of data in that event log?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, if there's specific scenarios, and well, to answer your question on who responds to you in that intercom button in the app, it actually usually goes up to the engineers and the PMs as well. And so the thing that people usually don't realize is when you click this little button, it'll probably go to the right person. We actually navigate it to the people that own the product or the engineers that work on that area. And so for a question like that, we're happy to hear the feedback for the scenarios that you're trying to accomplish, so we can figure out the best way to adjust our SDKs.
And then just to follow up to that, the way that you were using it seemed like that could get quite hairy in terms of the storage of those eventings. What's the licensing implication of having a IoT device pump logging data into the eventing?
Yeah, application insights can get a little pricey, but the thing to take away is that you actually run it in your own subscription. So it's kind of up to you how much you spend and how much you want to pump there.
So ultimately it ties back into the app insight billing?
Correct. You link your subscription to the Oregon App Center, and then those types of assets, blob export, AI export, are actually assets in your own instance, which is why I have two different windows for that, because one of them I'm logged into a different Azure account, essentially.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, you got it.
So we have been using VSTS extensively for the whole CI/CD process. So if we want to use App Center, is there like a migration path or any?
So if you use VSTS, you can actually use our VSTS tasks, which will ship your builds to App Center automatically. And so instead of using our build service, you would use the VSTS build service the same way you do today. But if you look at, there's an App Center distribute task in VSTS. It comes out of the box. And you can use that to say, hey, I want to release this to this distribution group inside of App Center. You can also use it to run UI tests. So you can just continue to use VSTS and extend it to App Center.
So we just add the App Center
add one step on there. Yep,
okay.
Exactly.
Cool. All right, thanks.
Yep, you got it.
This might be more of a lengthy question, so we can take it offline. But one of the things we've always struggled with is dealing with like pre-prod QA, production environments for QA, and like developer environments and all that stuff. Do you have any suggestions on how to deal with builds and distributions for those types of situations?
Yes, and that's a lengthy answer, so we should chat after.
Yeah, let's chat after.
Absolutely.
Yeah, mine was right along the same vein, in that you've got a build that's master, or a build that's a release. Database variables, passwords, user IDs could be different for each of these types of builds that you're defining.
Sure.
But the thing is, for those builds that are parallel for different projects, can you pull in the environment variables from a previous build definition and just have them pre-populated?
So are you referring to, like, if you want to set up build for a different branch, bringing those?
Yeah, you've got a couple of parallel branches off the main. You might have a couple dozen environment variables, of which half of them are specific to a particular
branch, per se.
Yeah. Be it a URI or a database or what have you.
So we have one of the things that came out, and I'm sure we're going to find ways to carry it over, is the pull request checks we released for the GitHub integration, which actually automatically clones your build definition for a new branch and compiles that itself. And so in terms of cloning and copying on the fly, you can do that using our API. We don't have an easy way to copy it inside of the UI today, but it is totally possible to move that stuff. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
When you
all want to be lazy programmers.
We're trying. We're trying.
I hear you, man.
Whoever was first.
We actually do only have 30 seconds, so we're going to stick around for a couple of more minutes. So you guys can ask us the question.
Is it possible to test the Windows app on App Center?
To build it, or as long as it's UWP, we can do that today.
All right. Okay, sure. One more question.
Yeah, we can always chat right after.
We're going to stick around for some time.
Cool. I appreciate you guys coming out. Thanks.
Thank you.